So Ajahn Anan asked for me to share some Dhamma reflections, some encouragement with you all today. So I'll do my best to share some reflections and Dhamma teachings that I find useful, and hopefully they'll be useful to you as well. And if they're not useful, you always feel free to put them down. One reflection I often come back to over and over again is the preciousness of our opportunity here as human beings to study and practice the Dhamma. Just like was just chanted in the invitation to give the Dhamma talk, where we recollect that the Brahma Sahampati said that to the Lord Buddha, that there are beings with little dust in their eyes. And so I like to reflect and recollect how rare that is, and to rejoice in all of us here, that we have sufficient merit and parami cultivated over the course of this life and many lives before, to have reached the point where there is little dust in our eyes. We might feel like it's a lot of dust. I sure feel like it's a lot of dust sometimes. But I also reflect and remember, or just the other day I heard that it's estimated that there are 8 billion people in the world now. Seems like a lot. And then we look at the retreat now, and there's some, I don't know the exact number, some 200 or 300 perhaps total. And you think, I'm not going to do the math, but that's a very small percentage of people who have taken the time and energy and renounced all the various other things, of which there are an infinite number, all the other things you could be doing right now to come practice, to make the mind still, to train the mind, to listen to the teachings of the Buddha, and to do that for your benefit and for the benefit of all beings, which I find is something incredibly beautiful and heartening, that we ourselves have done that, and also we have this worldwide community that also have made that same choice to put down whatever else there might be, which is the practice of renunciation, the Nekkhamma Parami, and to come here to practice the Dhamma. And you think that that's really something not easy to do, which I think is proven by how few people choose to do it. Because the attractions of the world, of all the different kinds of sense contact we can try to seek out, the habit of the mind is to see these things as very alluring, very desirable. But if we look more closely, we see, well, is it really that alluring? Is it really that desirable to seek out ever new, ever changing sights and sounds and tastes and smells and touch and thoughts? And I find this a very interesting reflection, because I think all of our minds, myself included, the mind will keep coming back to thinking that these things are actually worth desiring, actually worth chasing after. Different sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touch and mental objects. But then if you look back on your life, however long you've lived, whether it's a short time or a long time, what do you think, has one of those experiences ever satisfied you? And so of course not, because if it really satisfied you, you'd be satisfied all the way up until this present moment, and you wouldn't need to seek after anything else. You probably wouldn't come to listen to a Dhamma talk. So you think all those feelings that we've ever had, whether it was a feeling of sorrow, or a feeling of happiness, or a feeling of pleasure, or a feeling of pain, pleasant sight or ugly sight, a pleasant sound or a disturbing sound. You think in this moment, where are all those experiences now? Where are all those feelings that we've had in our lives that felt so important and so all-consuming in the moment we experienced it? I often like to reflect on this and think, well, it's very clear in this moment that those experiences are completely gone now. We, of course, have our memories, but those memories are in and of itself a different experience. To experience a memory as a mental object, it's not the same as what happened in the past. So we think those experiences are completely gone now. And that's one way of perceiving the emptiness of experience, is to reflect in that way, to bring the mind to emptiness through a more surface level, on the level of thought or perception. But that's a way to start. So again, coming back to our human life, how rare it is to come and have interest to practice Dhamma. Because you think there's actually many steps that one has to go through to reach this point where you have sufficient faith and wisdom to come practice on a retreat, a good fortune to meet with the great teacher we all have in Ajahn Anan. And we've likely all heard the analogy the Buddha gave for the blind turtle. And the whole planet's in a big ocean. And that blind turtle comes up just once every 100 years. And there's a little floating ring in that ocean. And you think, well, of course it is possible that the turtle would poke its head through the ring, but it'd be incredibly rare. So the Buddha compared human birth to that. And again, you can think, well, there are 8 billion people seems like a lot, but even if you just count all the insects and little ocean creatures, you can see that even the animal realm is already much, much more than the number of humans, not to mention the realms that we can't see with our normal eyes. And then we're taught that it's very rare for a Buddha to come into the world, for the dispensation of a Buddha to come into the world. And that's what's passed down on in the text, and we may or may not have faith in that teaching. For instance, it's said that in this eon, it's a very fortunate eon, 5 Buddhas in a single eon. So Shakyamuni Buddha being the 4th, Maitreya being the 5th, who's yet to come. And we have the good fortune to be born as humans in a time when that dispensation is still alive and the Buddha's teachings are still being realized by living humans. So this is a matter of faith, whether we believe that Buddhas are rare. And it's said that in some eons there's no Buddhas at all, and there can be many eons go by without a Buddha in a given world system. But another way to reflect on this, which came up for me recently when I was helping teach a class on the story of the Buddha, and I think we all know this story, but it touched me very deeply on this occasion where the Lord Buddha, as a bodhisattva, he went out of the palace for the first time, and he saw someone walking near his chariot. And he said, well, what is that? That person has, their skin's all wrinkled and they're hunched over like they have trouble walking. And the charioteer said, well, that's an old person, Your Highness. And the bodhisattva said, well, do we all have to become like that? And the charioteer said, yes, we're all subject to old age. So the thing that really touched me about this was just kind of imagining the reflection in the bodhisattva's mind at that point, just seeing old age and seeing all of us have to experience that, including ourselves. And wouldn't it be good to seek a way out? And of course, seeing a sick person, a dead person, and seeing that every single one of us are subject to these conditions, even though none of us want them. And he was so touched by that, he thought, well, all beings have to experience this. And wouldn't it be better to seek something that doesn't age, doesn't die, doesn't grow sick? But the thing that really touched me about this was to think, well, everyone in the world sees old people, sick people, and dead people. It's really, really common. And yet how many of us have the reflection that myself and everyone I love is subject to these conditions? It's inevitable. Wouldn't it be better to seek out that which doesn't age, sicken, or die, so I can give that to myself and those that I love? And at least for me, I know that when I first saw aging, sickness, and death, I didn't have those same thoughts as the bodhisattva in the story. I think it's probably quite rare. But it really touched me, the compassion of the bodhisattva, who I would imagine have this incredible love and compassion for all beings, and seeing that all beings must meet with these conditions, then thinking, well, wouldn't it be better to seek a way out of aging, sickness, and death? Because he had cultivated such great wisdom and metta over so many lifetimes. So he'd have this immense compassion for all beings, but also the wisdom to see that if he just lived his life, the life that was set out for him to become a great king, to rule over a kingdom, in the end, himself and all his subjects, everyone he loved, would all age, sicken, and die all the same. So wouldn't it be better to seek out that which doesn't age, sicken, or die? So this is one way to reflect, where we can get some sense in the heart of the rarity of a Buddha, even without thinking about the teaching in the text that we're told it's very rare. But we can just reflect and look around, look at oneself, look at others. How many people really think in that way, that having encountered aging, sickness, and death, that wouldn't it be better to seek something which doesn't age, sicken, or die for oneself and for everyone else? And so we've met with the Buddha's teaching. We're born in a time where the Buddha's teaching is still alive. And you can think that not everyone has the chance to hear the teachings. So just that in itself is already a great good fortune. And those that have heard the teachings, how many actually display any interest or understanding in what they've heard? That's also very rare. I think especially with the internet nowadays, a lot of people will hear a little bit of the Buddha's teachings, or at least read a little bit or hear a little bit here and there. But out of that great number of people, how many actually understand it deeply enough or have interest enough to follow up with it? And then out of that number, how many actually put it into practice and try to train the mind? It's very rare. And out of those who try out some meditation, how many people actually stick with it? I think we've all seen that that is very, very rare. A lot of people just try it a little bit, or just dabble in it a bit, which is still very meritorious and very good fortune. But to really stick with it enough to do a whole retreat like this is very rare. And to meet with a great enlightened master that I believe we have in Ajahn Anan, I would say is also very rare, very great opportunity, something that doesn't come along easily. And so I really encourage all of us here to make the most of this opportunity, to not be heedless about it, I think one can compare it to, for instance, if you came to the monastery and you think, well, the monastery has the great teacher, has the great facilities, peaceful, quiet atmosphere. It's a place that's very conducive to train the mind, to cultivate wholesome states, to cultivate the path that the Buddha taught. And you think if you came to Wat Mapjan just for an hour or 6 hours or one day, you'd really put your whole heart into the practice. You'd want to get the most out of it that you possibly could. You'd want to not waste any time, but to do your best to take advantage of the conditions that are available, which are very conducive. So I would suggest a way to reflect about our human life is the same way. These human lives are incredibly short. We're born, quickly grow up, quickly start aging, and get sick and die, and it's all over fairly quickly. But on this planet Earth at this time, we have the Buddha's teachings, we have quiet places, we have Kalyana Mitta, many spiritual friends available, we have great awakened beings. And so I would suggest that we could try to apply that same attitude of, well, let's make the most of this opportunity while we're still here, because we're here just a short time, to practice dana, sila, and bhavana, to try to cultivate the mind, to make it bright, to make it radiant, and to make it radiant and unified for the sake of seeing into the truth of the way things are, in order to cross over that which ages, sickens, and dies. And then we can see for ourselves that what the Buddha said is not in vain, that there is something that doesn't age, doesn't grow sick, and doesn't die. But until we see it for ourselves, we take it on faith that the Buddha and all the great masters that have come since, all the way up until the present day, they weren't just making this up. They were genuinely showing us the way out of compassion. And it's up to us in order to put those teachings to the test and to see if they really yield the fruits and yield the results that are promised. But it's only something that we can do ourselves. No one can do it for us. As Ajahn Anan has said, if the Buddha could do it for us, it would be done already. So it's something that we have to put forth effort in our own minds, put in the causes ourselves. Because we see that the universe that the Buddha taught is a universe that's lawful, in the sense that there's the law of cause and effect, of the law of karma, which is to say that people don't suffer or realize liberation just aimlessly or randomly, that we suffer and realize happiness based on causes that have been laid down, that liberation is realized through actions that we do in the present moment. And so those actions that we do in the present moment, by their very nature, can only be done by ourselves and ourselves alone. So the actions we do is we practice to be generous. And it's not just material generosity, but also generosity of heart, giving forgiveness and giving kindness to the best of our ability. And part of that giving of kindness is to give the gift of fearlessness, which is sila, not to harm others through various acts, like harming or stealing, lying, and so on. And we also give the gift of a well-trained mind, because we see that those with a mind well-trained are truly a gift to the world. The great masters that we've heard of or that we perhaps have met, we see that they've trained their minds, and that's something that's truly beneficial to everyone around them. And so we train to purify our minds. And one way to think of this is to increase the radiance of the mind more and more. Because these qualities and acts of generosity, virtue, and samadhi, they all have the effect of brightening the mind, making it radiant, and eventually getting unified in samadhi, which is a mind that can see the truth. And one reflection I'd like to suggest that we can all cultivate is a Brahmavihara that I personally find very useful. It's the Brahmavihara of mudita, or appreciative joy, sympathetic joy. So all the reflections I've been mentioning, you can use with yourself and with all those on retreat as well. But to think of mudita, or appreciative joy, one way to think of it is like a beloved child. So if you imagine you have a child, you wish them well just naturally. May they be well, may they be happy. And if they encounter some misfortune or suffering, you naturally feel, well, may they be free of that suffering. And if they encounter some good fortune, success, or happiness, you feel really happy for them. You feel like, well, may their good success continue. May it grow more and more. And so you can cultivate that quality of mudita for yourself as well. And that's what I would suggest to start with. Because of all the various habits of the mind, of which we can cultivate many, there's the habits of chasing after sensuality, chasing after aversion, getting lost in drowsiness, getting lost in restlessness, doubting here and there, and so on. And so we see that the mind is constantly being trained, whether we're Buddhist or not, whether we think we're a meditator or not, whether we're actively meditating or not. We're constantly training the mind in one way or another. And so one question to ask oneself, that I ask myself, is, well, what am I training the mind with in this moment? Am I training the mind to chase after external sense objects? Training the mind to being greedy or angry or slothful and tired, or restless? Or am I training the mind to recollect the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, devas, virtue, generosity, or metta, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity? So we see we have a choice in the present moment between cultivating a habit that will lead to further suffering, or cultivating a habit that will lead to happiness and well-being. So with mudita, we can think we have this great good fortune to be a human, to meet with the teachings, to meet with great teachers, and to have a body and mind that's sufficiently healthy and well to be able to listen to things, understand them, and sufficiently healthy to still be alive in this moment, to practice in this moment. Even if we have some ailment, or even if we have trouble maintaining certain postures, we can always practice as long as we are still alive. There's always the chance to practice. So we think of all these types of good fortune that we're experiencing. We have sufficient water and food to be alive at this moment, sufficient shelter, clothing, and medicine to be alive right now. So we can think, well, may this good fortune continue and increase more and more. We can feel happy for ourselves and happy for all those joining on this retreat, for instance. May your good fortune increase and continue. And this is cultivating the mind of mudita, appreciative joy. Like when we say anumodana at the end of some meritorious act, often we just say anumodana, and we may not cultivate that mind state as a meditation object. But I would just like to offer that or suggest that as a meditation object you could train with if you feel it's suitable to you. Of course, there's many meditation objects to choose from, and you may not feel inclined to the Brahma Viharas. But as Ajahn Anan teaches, we all can cultivate them to some degree. And cultivating metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, we all need those qualities to some degree, whether it's a mainstay of our practice or not. So just remembering our good fortune, rejoicing in that, and feeling happy for ourselves and for others. Even if it's someone who doesn't practice, we can feel happy for them, that they're alive as a human, that they have food, water, shelter, whatever their situation might be. So we can cultivate that heart of mudita. And we can spread that throughout the world, just like we can with loving kindness, compassion, or equanimity, to make the mind bright and radiant. And when the mind's bright and radiant in this way, then the mind is suitable for contemplation, as Ajahn Anan teaches. And a very important benefit of Brahmavihara practice, a benefit of metta practice that the Buddha taught, is that the mind becomes collected easily. It realizes calm and collectedness easily when metta is well established in the mind. So it's a quality we can all cultivate to some degree and rejoice in our good fortune. So finally, I'd just like to rejoice with all of you who've come together on this retreat in various countries, various time zones. Very happy for you that you have the faith and wisdom to come set aside time to practice the Dhamma, listen to the teachings, something that requires a lot of patient endurance. It's not something that's easy to do. It goes against the flow of the world. And so you already have a lot of merit and parami already just to reach this point where you're willing to put down other things to come practice. So may your good fortune continue, increase more and more, and may your practice continue until you reach that which doesn't age, sicken, or die. May you realize happiness and nibbana. Sadhu.